This is Health Yeah, your weekly update on what's going on in the health, wellness, and medical world with Monica Robbins.
Are you getting enough sleep at night? Well, if you're like me, probably not. According to the CDC, millions of Americans do not get the recommended amount of sleep each night. But not getting enough zzzz can contribute to some serious health problems.
So then they start trying to find out what was causing a stroke.
Our doctor is here with some tips to make a good night's sleep more than just a dream. And also ahead, I dig into the archives for a sleep study that I did to show you what lack of sleep did to my body.
Her brain and her body are showing signs of sleep deprivation. Her reaction time and her fine finger movements are all a lot slower.
Plus, those sleep trackers, many of us have them, but do they work?
You really should try and pay attention to how you're sleeping based on how you feel.
We'll show you how to get a better night's sleep all ahead on Prescription for Life. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Monica Robbins. Sleep is a basic human need. Tons of research shows how important it is, but many of us struggle to get enough of it each night, or we don't think it's that important. But that lack of sleep can actually wreak havoc on your health. This week, our expert shows us what a lack of sleep can actually do to our bodies and how to prioritize sleep. And many people have a glass of wine or maybe a cup of tea to help go to sleep. Do those things even work? Well, Verify will dig into the best sleep methods. But first, a Houston couple had trouble sleeping and a host of health problems because of a lack of sleep. Stephanie Whitfield shares their wake-up call.
Ora and John Hines sleep well now, but that wasn't the case for many years.
But I would doze off after sleeping 6 or 7 hours, and I just figured the type of work I did was just stressful.
Ora's insomnia was so bad, doctors say it triggered a stroke when she was 43 years old.
So then they start trying to find out what was causing a stroke. It was the migraines, and then the migraines was coming because I wasn't sleeping.
Her sleep neurologist with UT Health Houston and Tier Memorial Hermann says for many people, insomnia peaks midlife.
Mainly because of work-related stresses, family-related stresses. You're starting to take care of multiple generations, maybe not just one.
Hormonal and physical changes during that stage of life make it harder to sleep too.
In many cases, there's weight gain, and that itself leads to obstructive sleep apnea, which can lead to frequently interrupted sleep. And that means you wake up tired, which means you don't function as well during the daytime.
She says there are changes you can make to get some shut-eye, like reducing screen time or taking over-the-counter sleep aids. John and Ora use CPAP machines now. It makes bedtime sound like
Darth Vader.
A sleep study revealed both had common midlife sleep issues. Now,
we actually go to bed and we actually get up early, so we sleep.
They're grateful to have the energy to keep up with their grandkids and great-grandkids. Stephanie Whitfield, KHOU 11 News.
After years of restless sleep, a California woman discovered she had sleep apnea. Karen Wolk says she didn't know what a restful night's sleep was until about 5 years ago.
I've never really known what it's like to get a full night's sleep.
She's one of the nearly 40 million Americans living with obstructive sleep apnea. It's when your airway closes while you're sleeping, causing you to wake up tired, even if you slept more than 10 hours at a time. Karen says she was forgetting things, falling asleep while talking, and getting lost while driving. She says she was introduced to Inspire. It's a surgically implanted device based on pacemaker technology that stimulates the airway to allow it to open while a person sleeps.
This new procedure works for most people. It's less invasive and easier recovery than traditional surgeries.
I had like a revelation, like this is the best night of sleep I've ever had in my life. It was a complete game changer.
Wolk says she's had a good 8 hours of sleep each night since she began using the device. 50 to 70 million Americans are estimated to have some kind of sleep disorder. Brea Love in Sacramento has more on when it's time to get help.
Davis resident Molly Baker has multiple sclerosis, which causes major fatigue. Her doctor recommended a sleep study and very quickly determined she had severe sleep apnea.
81 events an hour and 30 is bad. So anything above that is really bad.
The technicians monitoring her overnight woke her up with a CPAP machine to maintain her breathing.
I decided I was going to be an ideal patient, right? And put the machine on and not complain. Fell right back asleep and had one of the best nights of sleep ever.
That was 8 years ago. Now she won't go a night without it.
Anything that disturbs sleep potentially can be treated and diagnosed at a sleep center.
That could be REM disorders or abnormal movements, but 80 to 90% of patients in sleep clinics have apnea.
Right now, the center can accommodate around 15 patients a night, but if an inpatient study isn't for you, you might qualify for an at-home test.
A home test usually is much simpler and more specific, and is monitoring usually, do I snore or not? Am I not breathing or not? Is my oxygen dropping or not? Those are the essentials.
In both situations, the data is collected, reviewed, and sent back to your primary care doctor. In turn, quickly getting you answers and on the path to better sleep. As for Baker, she wants to urge those who are diagnosed with sleep apnea to follow the treatment.
Sleep apnea can be life-threatening. It can be lifestyle threatening, especially if it's not treated. Is your vanity really worth death or a bad health event? I don't think so.
Our expert stresses sleep is foundational to health and wellness, just like diet and exercise, and it cannot be ignored. Here's what else she had to say. Joining me now is Dr. Nancy Foldberry, who is the director of the Sleep Disorders Clinic at Cleveland Clinic. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
This is the topic everybody needs to talk about, really. Right. So I'm going to just start off with, how much sleep do we really need?
That's a great question. Most adults need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, and that's based on the National Sleep Foundation recommendations. But I think it's really important to remember that sleep needs are genetically determined. So there are a few % of us who are genetically wired to function well on relatively little sleep, let's say 4 hours of sleep, and a few % that need more sleep, like 9 to 10 hours. It's also important to remember, however, that about 40% of adults in the United States are sleep deprived. So they are regularly getting less than 7 hours of sleep.
So can you catch up?
We can catch up just temporarily. So for example, we had a bad night of sleep last night. A 30-minute nap today might refresh us and allow us to get through our day, reasonably well. But chronic sleep deprivation puts us at risk for cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders like diabetes, obesity, and now brain health disorders, including cognitive decline and dementia. So it's really important that middle-aged adults start paying attention to sleep. Really everyone, at every age, should be paying attention to sleep. But by our middle-aged years, we ought to be making sure we're sleeping at least 7 hours on a regular basis in order to promote good cardiovascular and brain health as we age.
But what kind of sleep is kind of important too? Because like I use my Fitbit and it tells me I'm usually in light sleep.
Yes.
How do I know what's good sleep, what's not good sleep?
Yes. So our wearables are accurate in some ways, but limited in some ways as well. And so we know that we need both REM sleep, which is dream sleep, for a variety of reasons, including promoting brain health. We also know, however, that we need deep non-REM sleep, which we also call in the sleep laboratory slow wave sleep. And actually, recent studies have found some very fascinating relationships between brain health and slow wave sleep. We need enough slow wave sleep every night to clear toxins from our brain. And if we cut ourselves short of that sleep, our brains will actually accumulate the protein that makes Alzheimer's disease. So it's important that we get enough sleep because our brains naturally cycle. More slow wave sleep in the first part, more REM sleep at the end. So if we're going to bed too late, or if we're waking up too early, we're likely to be depriving ourselves chronically of one of those two critically important stages of sleep.
How do you get those stages of sleep, though, if you're not a great sleeper to begin with?
Well, cycling does happen naturally, but for people with sleep disorders, it's important to recognize those and get those treated. So the chronic insomniac may really have short sleep, and may be deprived of both of those stages of sleep. And there are treatments for insomnia. Outside of sleeping pills, we've got cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia that's evidence-based, very effective treatment for insomnia. The other most common sleep disorder is sleep apnea. And sleep apnea can affect people of all ages. In fact, women after menopause are at the same risk of severe sleep apnea as men. Even though they may not have large necks, they may not snore loudly. And so women are known as they age to get missed in terms of sleep apnea diagnoses, or at least for that to be delayed. Treatment of sleep apnea can restore breathing at night and make it easier to stay in deep non-REM sleep and REM sleep. But if we're waking up repeatedly, we're never going to get sustained deep non-REM sleep or REM sleep.
I'm glad you brought up menopause, because a lot of people ask me, you know, I have no problem falling asleep, I just can't stay asleep. What's the answer to that?
Yeah. So it's probably multifactorial. Certainly with menopause, hot flashes, night sweats, those things will wake women up. And there are some medications that are not necessarily FDA approved for those indications that probably are somewhat effective for those things. And gynecologists and other women's health experts often recognize how to treat that part of the menopause sleep disorder. But very important to remember, as I just alluded to, that around the age of menopause is when women start developing sleep disorders. So the risk of sleep apnea increases, the risk of insomnia disorders increase, restless leg syndrome is common in women as they age. So very often when women present to me symptoms of menopause, they also are at high risk for one of those very common sleep disorders. And we need to treat both. We need to work on the sleep disorder side as well as treating primary menopause symptoms.
What about supplements? Any recommendations for those?
Well, the supplements that are hot now are magnesium, I would say, and melatonin. So melatonin, a lot of people are taking melatonin. Many others too, valerian root and passion flower, and there's a long list of supplements that allegedly promote sleep. And there are small amounts of data that suggest this, but in most cases, negative studies. So I think it's really unclear how effective these are, and they're probably not as effective as some of the evidence-based therapies that we use in sleep medicine. Melatonin is a hormone, and we all have melatonin that secretes in our brains at night. It's the hormone that signals us to fall asleep. And the idea is that if you take extra melatonin, you might be able to fall asleep faster and sleep deeper. And there are some patients who are prone to insomnia that do have some benefits from melatonin. But melatonin is a much better medicine to change sleep timing, like the shift work person, the jet-lagged person, even the night owl kind of brain, circadian rhythm disorders, than it does just improve sleep in regular people who have normal sleep timing. So I think melatonin is a little bit overdone. And certainly when we see it effective, it's in doses of 3, 5, maybe 10 milligrams, not 20 milligrams and over, which many people are taking.
So what about the magnesium? Is that, because that's like the new hot thing?
Yeah, magnesium has some data to support that it improves sleep quality. Magnesium also helps restless legs. And 15% of the Caucasian adult population suffers from restless legs. So in moderate amounts, 200, 300, 400 milligrams per day, magnesium can probably help sleep.
And when you talk about restless legs, for people who may not know what that is, explain what that is.
Restless legs is a sleep disorder, sometimes referred to as a movement disorder, that's characterized by an irresistible need to move the legs at night. So most people will find themselves getting into bed and realizing that they can't sleep. But with further questioning, their legs are twitching and their legs aren't comfortable and they need to reposition and stretch. Some people get this in the evening and they're unable to sit in front of the television because their legs are bothering them. And so the symptoms are before one falls asleep. But once one falls asleep, restless leg patients have repeated leg jerks. We call them periodic limb movements that can keep them awake. And so treating restless legs, especially in women around that menopausal period, is another way to improve sleep quality.
Time change. That's always, especially for those states that spring forward, always a problem. What is your best advice for those who are going to deal with that? We're still, some time between. So what do you do?
We love the longer days, which is wake promoting, right? When we're in sunshine, it's wake promoting. But 1 hour of sleep loss can be detrimental, particularly for those of us who are chronically sleep deprived. And many of us are chronically sleep deprived. So I think the most important thing to recognize is that with 1 hour of sleep loss, the timing, our sleep timing has changed, and that's enough to increase the rate of motor vehicle accidents. Studies have shown on the Monday after the time shift that motor vehicle accidents that morning are more common than the Monday morning before the shift. There are studies that show that people are at more risk for cardiovascular incidents like heart attacks, and that's probably because of a combination of circadian changes, which control all of our hormones, cortisol and all the hormones that regulate heart rate and blood pressure, and also the autonomic nervous system that has to adjust to time changes. And so this is the few days after the time shift are vulnerable times. We sleep less well, and so people who are particularly vulnerable to falling asleep behind the wheel or have serious heart disease could be at more risk just by virtue of losing 1 hour of sleep.
I'm one of those people, though, after the time change, it takes me weeks to get back into that rhythm. Is that normal? Or
I think it is. It takes me a long time as well. And it's because our circadian rhythm, which is a 24-hour rhythm, has adjusted, and it takes time to adjust to that. It's similar to I would say, like when kids are going back to school in the fall and they've had a crazy wake up schedule, during the summer, and then we expect them to get sort of lined up again in the few days before school starts. The timing of their sleep needs to change, and the timing of all of our physical bodily rhythms needs to adjust. So it does take some time to adjust.
What's more important, the time you go to sleep or the time you wake up?
Well, generally, what stabilizes a good sleep-wake rhythm is the time you wake up. So for people who have trouble sleeping, we talk about anchoring the wake-up time. Make the wake-up time the same every day, and that will signal your brain over time to know when your brain should fall asleep at night.
So what about for those shift workers? Because we've seen study after study indicating that can be really detrimental to the human body. How does it impact sleep schedule, like especially for those who work overnights or those who work a night shift?
Yes. Shift workers are vulnerable, and there is studies that suggest that they're at increased risk for cardiovascular disease, brain health problems, even cancer, because they sleep in a way that is chronically misaligned with human nature. And so they may sleep during the day and get enough of sleep during the day, but that sleep quality is probably not the same. And it may not be that they get into those deep stages of sleep that we talked about. And so shift workers are very challenged by this. And it's really critically important for shift workers to not allow getting sleep deprived. When you have the opportunity to sleep, it's important to sleep. And it's important for families and loved ones to recognize the need to keep the house quiet, the need for dim lighting and all of that during the day to promote good sleep during the day.
I'm glad you brought that up. So what are the best tips for how to get a good night's sleep?
Yep.
Or day sleep if you're a shift worker?
Yeah. Well, one is to anchor your wake-up time again and allow yourself to naturally feel sleepy at night and then wake up the same time. Another would be to avoid naps. So unless if you have a sleep disorder that requires naps, or you're a shift worker and you need that nap to get to work, it's important to probably not nap excessively during the day, because then we've slept off that sleep debt and we're not going to sleep as well as at night. It's also important to exercise. Exercise is wake promoting during the day, but not near bedtime, so not within a couple hours of bedtime. Avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is the most common agent people use in the United States to fall asleep. The challenge is that while alcohol helps us get to sleep, once the alcohol metabolizes, it fragments sleep tremendously, particularly REM sleep. And so it can do more harm than good. Caffeine later in the day, after noon, 1, 2 p.m., is probably detrimental to sleep. Those are the main tips. It's also important to think about behaviors and think about the sleep room. So our bedroom has to be a comfortable place. It's got to be, the mattress, the bedding, all of that needs to be comfortable. The temperature should be relatively low, like 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The lighting should be such that, we're not getting light coming in the morning or during the night. It's important to keep electronics out of the bedroom. That's a challenge for so many people. But the light emitted from a cell phone in bed at night will suppress our melatonin. It will suppress the endogenous melatonin being secreted in our brains and make it hard for us to fall asleep. So it's really important, particularly for people having trouble falling asleep, to stay away from dim lit rooms, get off electronics an hour or two before bedtime.
What about reading? Because I know a lot of people, and I'm one of them, if I read, I'll fall asleep before, 3 pages are gone. But is that stimulating your brain as well, or is it just different compared to playing games on an iPad?
Yeah, I think reading is great, especially if we read a real book, not on an electronic device. For people with insomnia, we advise that you don't do anything too stimulating. So don't be on the last few, chapters of a great novel. Don't be on TV watching something very stimulating. But I tend to have a book at my bedside every night and just get through a few pages, and that helps me fall asleep as well.
What's the most common question you're asked?
Oh, probably the question about waking up, I think, like, what's the single one thing you can do to set your sleep rhythm well? And that single one thing is to anchor your wake-up time. Set a standard wake-up time every single day.
Okay, when you say standard wake-up time, could that be one day 5 a.m., one day 6 a.m.?
It should be the same. Now, if it's within an hour or so and between weekdays or work days and days off, that's okay. What we tend to do is wake up at 4, 5, 6 in the morning during the work week and then sleep till 9 or 10 on the weekends. And that's just too big of a shift to expect ourselves to fall back into our weekday rhythm by Monday morning.
Even if you're not getting to bed on the weekend until 3 or 4 in the morning.
Right, because what happens on Sunday, if we slept in until 9, 10, 11 o'clock, we're not going to be able to fall asleep at 10 o'clock on Sunday. And many people with insomnia dread Sunday night more than ever because that's the most difficult night to fall asleep. And then they're worrying about the next day, their work week.
The most important thing, it sounds like a lot of people don't take sleep as seriously as they should, but it's really the only way to clean your brain, right?
Right. So it's fascinating now when I speak with patients. We've told patients for years that you need sleep to avoid a heart attack, to keep your blood pressure down, to keep your blood sugar down, all those normal cardiovascular and metabolic health habits. But now we also know that not getting enough sleep promotes the accumulation of toxins in the brain that lead to cognitive decline and literally can lead to Alzheimer's disease. So you do need 7 to 8 hours of sleep on a regular basis in order to optimize brain health as we age.
And that snooze button, how often should you? Is it okay to push it?
It's okay probably to push it once.
Oh, okay. Asking for a friend who usually pushes it like 4 or 5 times in the morning. So good point. Dr. Fulveri, thank you so much. Great insight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The doctor mentioned sleep deprivation. Now that can cause memory loss, impaired decision-making, and our ability to do daily tasks. In 2008, I underwent a sleep study to show what happens to our body when we're not getting enough sleep. Take a look. So this is it.
Yes, it is.
It's 8 a.m. and I've already been up for 3 hours. My brain is wired and I'm given a series of computer tests to get a baseline reading of my memory, awareness, and focus. Then a sobriety test. I'm not permitted anything to help me stay awake.
I haven't had caffeine in 4 days.
A camera in the room watches me, and every 6 hours I'm given a 40-minute test where I have to sit quietly in the dark and resist sleep. I already failed the first one, dozed off for seconds after just 30 minutes. Sleep deprivation can cause depression, mood problems. It can affect your motor skills and focus. It can make you gain weight and worse.
Essentially, every organ system in the body has been shown to suffer in some way when we live in a chronically sleep-deprived state.
After 24 hours,
my eyes are dry and sticky, and I sat down, I tried, and I forgot how to use the computer.
Humans do not have the ability to accurately perceive when they're entering into a sleep-deprived danger zone.
She closed her eyes. She's having a hard time. She's drowsy. This is sleep. She's awake, but she's very drowsy. She's sleeping with her eyes open.
After 32 hours...
Come on back like you're on a tightrope, heel to toe.
Okay, that's not even funny.
How do you feel?
Really nauseous.
Okay, are you dizzy?
Yeah.
Touch your nose with that finger. Good. Other hand. Okay, do it again now. Try to touch the tip of your nose. Does that seem a little off too, your coordination? Okay, yeah, it's slower than yesterday.
24 hours of sleep deprivation can have the same effects as being legally drunk.
Her brain and her body are showing signs of sleep deprivation. Her reaction time and her fine finger movements are all a lot slower.
No matter how hard I focused or tried, I couldn't control my body, and that's what scares me, to think, gosh, what if I was driving, or what if I was operating machinery? You can't deny what the brain waves are telling you, and it's just those little micro sleeps and the little fractions of seconds that could mean life or death.
To put it in perspective, how many times have you driven somewhere and suddenly you realize you don't even remember getting there? Even though you're awake and driving, your brain waves are sleeping, and that can be incredibly dangerous, especially on the road. So what about those typical ways of getting a good sleep? Melatonin, a glass of wine, or a cup of tea? Do those things actually work? Well, Verify's Abby Larico takes a look.
The sedative effects of alcohol may help you wind down and fall asleep, but the Sleep Foundation says that's also been linked to poor quality, shorter sleep as the alcohol works its way through your system.
Middle of the night awakening, to drink a glass or two with your dinner, stop that, and the problem tends to go away.
How about a glass of herbal tea, like the kind that's marketed for bedtime? The benefits of natural remedies like lavender and chamomile have been studied for centuries, and this NIH study from just a few years ago finds drinking herbal tea can help alleviate insomnia symptoms. Melatonin is a naturally occurring hormone in your body that helps you fall asleep at night, and it's also available in pill form. The Mayo Clinic and NSF say taking melatonin can help with short-term sleep issues like jet lag or schedule changes. Our sources say it's not generally habit-forming, but can cause headaches, next-day drowsiness, and even bad dreams. It is important to know it's not actually fully FDA regulated. Another increasingly common, largely unregulated sleep aid is cannabidiol, or CBD in various forms. This NIH study found proper CBD use could help alleviate anxiety-related sleep issues, but says more research is needed. And the Sleep Foundation explains even in existing research, it's still unclear if the CBD is actually helping with sleep or tackling other issues like stress and pain that keep us awake. If you have a regular, healthy routine and you're still having a hard time catching Z's, it could be a good time to talk to your doctor about specific remedies that could work for you. With your Verify, I'm Abby Larico.
Now, wearing a sleep tracker device has become very popular, but do they work? Experts say they're not very precise because they're not able to measure brain waves. They keep track of the small movements while you're in bed. Now, an expert explains how you should use these devices to aid in sleep.
You know, I think that you have insomnia and you have anxiety about your sleep, and then really focusing on that data can be a negative thing and can create this unrealistic standard that you're aiming for this sleep score rather than paying attention to how you're really actually sleeping. You really should try and pay attention to how you're sleeping based on how you feel, but then maybe also look at it longitudinally over the course of a week or 2 weeks.
He goes on to say to check with your doctor if you suspect you may have a sleep disorder. Another way you can find out if you have a sleep disorder is by downloading the Cleveland Clinic Sleep app from either Apple or Android. The app offers a validated sleep questionnaire and can calculate your risk for the most common sleep disorders, such as obstructive sleep apnea, insufficient sleep, shift work sleep disorder, or insomnia. Plus, you can plug in your zip code and find a sleep specialist near you. That'll do it for this week's edition of Prescription for Life. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Monica Robbins, and I'll be back with another dose next week. Until then, wishing you and yours good health.
Thank you so much for tuning into Health Yeah. Please find me on Twitter and Instagram at Monica Robbins. Like and follow my Facebook page, Monica Robbins WKYC. Find video podcasts at Monica Robbins' channel on YouTube. And please subscribe. Wishing you great health and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for listening to Health Yeah with Monica Robbins from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now so you never miss an update. And find more on everything you heard here on WKYC.com and on the WKYC app.